to another episode of BioHub. Today, we're super excited to welcome a phenomenal guest in Matthew Shaulis. Matthew is the Chief Commercial Officer and US President of Hansa Biopharma. With over 20 years of experience in the pharma industry, he's held top executive roles with giants like Pfizer and Teva. Now he's leading the charge at Hansa, bringing the groundbreaking treatments for rare immunological diseases to the US. We're diving into some fascinating topics today. We'll explore the incredible growth at Hansa, what makes it stand out, and the unique challenges and opportunities in the biotech world. Matthew will share his insights on making tough business decisions, navigating the unpredictable biotech landscape, and exciting milestones ahead for Hansa. Plus, we'll get a peek into his personal journey and what fuels his impressive career. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Matthew. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm doing really, really well today. Thanks for asking, Max, and just appreciate this opportunity to have a conversation with you. I think that your podcast is highly regarded, and I know it'll be a thought-provoking discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been really lucky to have some good people on, definitely. But yeah, let's jump into Hansa. So just over a year ago, you decided to go from SVP at Pfizer to up and coming Hansa. What made you think Hansa was the right move for you and inspired you to join?
Yeah, that's a great question, Max, and it was in many cases uh, multiple factors, right, that got me comfortable that this was the right thing. And I think the one of the first is that it's a validated product and platform. Imlifidase has regulatory approval in the EMA. We have well-established manufacturing, and among some other therapeutic areas, imlifidase also has proof of concept in autoimmune diseases. So that sort of overall platform was very appealing. The management team at the company is fantastic. It starts with Søren Tolstrup, our CEO, but includes other members of the C-suite, all of whom have extensive experiences at large pharma as well as with biotechs, and so that key component really checked out. And then from a capital standpoint, I joined Hansa in 2023. We had funding at that time into 2025, and the ability to have the resources to pursue the company's vision appeared to be secured, which was really critical. And then I think the final factor was one of career growth, right? I was in an SVP role at Pfizer. I'd been in other roles at Pfizer, where I was a president of a division, for an important geographic zone. And as much as that was really rewarding work, and Pfizer's a great organization, I wasn't exposed to some of the C-suite responsibilities. And so for me, the opportunity to join a great company like Hansa, but also move into a C-suite role, made it, essentially a no regret move.
Yeah, and look, as a recruiter, I've spoken to so many people that have been in the position you were in at Pfizer, and their desirable move is with what you've moved into. Going and having more responsibility. It's almost like getting to that point in your career and saying, like, I want to. I would say not even say a risk with Hansa. To be fair, you said they got the financial backing, but you want to take the reins more, and I've seen that loads.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a couple different factors that come together, and career growth is definitely a part of it, and then also continuing to pursue innovation, with some really exciting products that are going to make a big difference for people and patients. Right, that's also got to be an important part of the motivators.
Yeah, and then I suppose how does that compare with your time with companies like Pfizer? Going from a big pharma company, like you say, you didn't have the C-suite responsibilities to then, a company like Hanso who's up and coming and growing.
Yeah, happy to talk a little bit about that. Let me start with what's a commonality: a real strong focus on innovation, a strong focus on bringing new benefit to patients and ensuring that people have access to medicines, and also across the company, really experienced colleagues. And I saw that at Pfizer and Teva and J&J earlier in my career, but I also see that as a common thread with the work that we're doing at Hansa. And I continue to be impressed with the background and the skill set of the colleagues at Hansa. And we're continuing to build out even more colleagues to join the organization. Now, of course, there are some classic things that you see moving from a large pharma company to a biotech. We certainly have less process and governance than a large company like Pfizer. We are more agile, but I always felt like it was remarkable at Pfizer just how quickly we could move, just how rapidly we could make adjustments and be agile despite our size. But I have to say, biotech company and Hansa in particular certainly does that in a stronger way. I think the other thing that to me, uh, really has been a somewhat surprising observation is the need for cross-functional integration. And at Pfizer, the challenge with cross-functional integration was the scale.
Yeah.
So many different departments, so many different capabilities. Oftentimes, the art of doing things really well at Pfizer was mastering the complexity of that large enterprise and creating cross-functional integration, despite that scale. There is also a need for creating cross-functional integration at a small biotech like Hansa. And at Hansa, it comes in a different form than it did at Pfizer. It's such a small, nimble, fast organization that it's creating cross-functional integration amidst that speed and that agility that ends up being, the real opportunity for the company. And it's something that I feel like we do really well at Hansa. Honestly, I felt like Pfizer did a great job of cross-functional integration despite its massive scale. So I think those are some similarities, but also some things that make up, in some cases, surprising learnings.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool dynamic to talk about. I bring up Steve Jobs quite a lot in these podcasts, but I always think he's got an interesting mindset. Like as Apple grew to the ginormous company it was, he always used to say, "Look, we're the biggest startup on the planet," and that was basically what you were talking about. They wanted every head of division to meet every week or month, whatever it is, to coincide those problems. Um, it, we, and if they're doing it and do it right, then why can't companies like Pfizer?
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I think there's another common thread between large companies and small companies. And it's relatable, I think, to, what Steve Jobs has said. And that's that regardless of the scale of your organization, you need to have real clarity about what the priorities are. Because whether you're a large, multinational biopharma or you're a small multinational biotech, you're involved in a very complex business. Considering research, development, medical, commercial. Whether
Hmm.
you're a big company or a small company, it's easy to get pulled in a lot of different directions with the many different efforts that the company is making on a regular basis. Declaring what the priorities are, and regularly revisiting those priorities, and then talking about the best opportunities to pursue them is a healthy exercise in either a big or a small company. And I think that's another sort of common thread. Now, the way you do that in a biotech versus the way that you do it in a big company can indeed be quite different, but it's still the same fundamental exercise. Focus on the mission, focus on the purpose, and then make decisions around what you're going to do and trade off the things that you're not going to do.
Do you think as well, like does it take different personalities to thrive in a big pharma to a small biotech, or do you think that's really not the case? Um,
I, yeah, I think that's a great question, Max. I think it's a matter of what people prefer, how they like to operate.
yeah,
I think there's something to be said. for a little bit more of maybe the stability and the process and the governance, maybe some of the the rigor that happens around decisions. And I think a lot of people prefer that, and they like a larger biopharma. I think there are other people that have a little bit more of a comfort level around agility and making decisions quickly, even if you don't have all of the information. And I think in a lot of cases, people at biotech organizations are able to rely on their prior experiences, and that basis, gives them some some opportunity to maybe accelerate decision making.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I've seen people with similar personality types be successful in both environments. I think it's really a matter of what you prefer, and also what you enjoy most, right? I think a lot of people get a tremendous sense of purpose and satisfaction uh, being a part of biopharma, and I think you get that purpose and satisfaction at a big or a small company. Um, but whether or not you enjoy a big or a small company is also another factor. Either way, you're really gonna get a great sense of satisfaction out of that purpose of advancing innovation and
Yeah,
bringing great treatments, forward for patients.
yeah, that's why everyone's in the industry, and I get
Yeah,
that passion from pretty much everyone I speak to. Definitely. Talking of you know growing companies, Hansa's obviously done pretty well at that over the last few years or so. Could you just give us a glimpse of to what that growth looks like and what's been driving it?
sure. Yeah, happy to talk a little bit about that. And I think in a nutshell, Hansa has been evolving, and it's still on a journey to go from a research focused company to a development focused company, and then to pivot and become, what I would call sort of medical phase, where medical affairs is very critical,
Mhm.
and then further into commercial. And so I think that transformation has really been the driving factor. Of course, we're really pleased that we've advanced all the way into commercial stage in Europe. We have an indication for highly sensitized patients undergoing kidney transplantation, and so with that, we have a commercial team, also a medical team in Europe, and this is after successfully, developing our molecule for kidney transplant. But we're also very much what I would describe as in a clinical and medical phase in the United States as well. Really pleased that we have made strong progress on our phase 3 pivotal study for kidney transplant in highly sensitized patients in the United States, where that phase 3 study will ultimately be the basis of an approval. In fact, Max, just this morning we issued a press release that phase 3 study has fully randomized
Oh wow,
in the United States. So we're really excited about that. That has definitely been a growth driver for the company to do, a substantial phase 3 in an important market like the U.S. And then I think ultimately we're in the very early stages, but in time we'll build a U.S. organization. We are currently headquartered in Sweden. Our research and our development activities are really anchored out of Sweden. And then, as I mentioned, we have a commercial and medical team all across Europe. In time, we'll be building, a bespoke, high expertise team in the U.S. across a number of functional disciplines, including, medical and commercial. So I'd say those are the main drivers.
amazing, amazing. And let's talking of the industry. I mean, biotech can be pretty unpredictable. How do you handle the ups and downs, and what does this volatility mean for a company like Hansa?
It can be a real roller coaster, and I think that the first thing that you need to do is just recognize that there will be ups and downs, There is very little stasis. So when things are seemingly going really, really well, that's not going to be the case indefinitely. And also when they seem like they're going poorly, that too will pass. And there'll be opportunities to continue to make progress. I think that that's sort of a mentality that things are never as good as you think they are, and they're never as bad as you think or you feel that they are. For me personally, I've always had a bit of maybe a level of stoicism, where I think that it's helpful to just focus on what you really can control,
Hmm.
and not allow yourself to get too distracted or too emotionally wrapped up in the things that you can't control, and that helps, I think, immensely in a biotech environment. And then I think there's also just an overall approach that you need to have as a company where you're always planning, and the planning is thinking through ways that you may be able to mitigate risks. And perhaps what that does is ensure that the lows aren't quite as low as they could be, but
Hmm.
also be ready to capitalize on the opportunities as they emerge, to act quickly, and that opportunism maybe can help you at times to make the highs a little bit higher than they might otherwise be. So I think overall, a lot of it's mindset, and at least for me, that's how I navigate, and frankly, ultimately end up enjoying a biotech environment.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think a roller coaster is the perfect way to put it. I obviously feel it from this side. Um, going to a startup towards the end of last year, I think people thought, "What, Max? What are you doing?" Is now really the right time. But yeah, I think there's been umps of positivity throughout the whole market at the start of this year and going into the middle. So I think, like you said, when there's positives, it's really positive, and but it's going to come back around and level itself out and almost normalize. Um, yeah, I think that's almost easier to say than actually think when it's all going on as well.
Absolutely. When you're on the roller coaster and you know, you're plummeting down to the trough, right? It's easy to get caught up in the moment, and you have to remind yourself that there's numerous opportunities that the company is pursuing, and then the highs are maybe a little bit more emotionally drawn in, right? You
Yeah, I think you've got to celebrate those highs as well. I think that's all
absolutely.
part of it. I think it's a strange dynamic now because at Avetix I lead the biotech unit, and then there's another guy who leads TIC, which is testing, inspection, certification, and his industry is really unique because it includes every industry from everywhere. So if one industry is doing well, like if biotech's down, construction might be up, and he sees the benefits all over the place. And if you don't get vacancies from one area, he'll get them from another. So it's really stable for him. Whereas he looks at me at the other side of the room, and I'm going to the market's gone down again, or we're waiting for it to come back up so I can get some more vacancies. And I don't think it really he really understands. But it's definitely no. I don't think I would change it.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah, look, there's something to be said for diversifying away, risks and achieving some stability. Yeah, you don't have the same level of excitement or satisfaction that comes from that kind of approach.
Yeah,
But look, I think in biotech too, there are definitely opportunities to plan for the risks that you may see, be ready for them. I think we've seen many companies do their best to navigate a tough capital markets environment in these last few years,
yeah,
and lots of organizations have recognized the challenge and acted accordingly. And so for many companies, I think they've been able to make sure that the lows aren't quite so low, because
Yeah.
you're thoughtful, and you adopt a rational approach to deal with it.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. So season one, we had I don't know if you'll have heard, but Paul Peter Tack came on to the CEO of Candle Therapeutics, and he was talking about how positive everything was going for Candle and all of that, and but yet he'd laid off 40% of the team. And I asked him the question. It's like, well, why? And he said, well, we've got these four data readouts through 2024. We need to make sure we have the cash to actually hear them out. So even though like all was well from the outside, you had that one little thing, and you were like, well, why? And we went to JPM, and everyone was saying, yeah, you 100% made the right decision there. So you know, it's crazy.
Yeah, but there is a way, right? And whether you want to call that tenacity or mental toughness, right? I'm just a big believer that you keep playing the game, you keep fighting the fight,
Yeah,
you keep working to solve the problem, and sometimes half the battle is just not quitting, right? It's finding a way, and I think that example of cost reduction or restructuring is a great one, right? That's an example of a company finding a way forward despite significant challenges. And whether it's life or it's biotech, I think the principles all apply similarly.
yeah, yeah. And in biotech, you get a completely different mix of mindsets from scientists to sales guys. How do you see these different perspectives coming together, especially like in a leadership team as well? You just
Yeah,
as a general.
well, I think it starts with some really great, really experienced people at Hansa, and I think this is the case at a lot of biotech companies. But we have people with an extensive background, often decades of experience at larger scale biopharma companies, and then they've also got experience at biotech companies. So what I find consistently at Hansa is that people can sort of draw on their best in class experiences from large biopharma, but they can also draw on their more kind of nimble, agile experiences at other biotechs for how to adapt, that bigger model and those best in class approaches to speed and agility, right? And so having colleagues with both that large biotech or that large biopharma and that biotech background has really helped us. I think when it comes to making great decisions and working across functions. I think the other thing that has really helped with decision making is that Swedish culture is known for harmony and consensus. And so there have been numerous opportunities where, you know, getting to a good decision or reaching some cross functional alignment has really been enabled by the underlying culture of the company being, headquartered out of the Nordics and in particular
Amazing.
in Sweden. And look, there are times when, to be completely forthright, it can seem like we're investing in harmony and consensus on small things where it's a little bit overdone. But that's not a bad price to pay for having a culture that's hardwired to make good decisions and achieve alignment. But I think there's another fundamental principle too, which I think is really well expressed at Hansa, and that's that people listen to each other. They respect each other. I think people um, respect other functional areas,
Yeah,
and as a result, they look to people in other functional areas for their input and
I like
and
that.
their expertise. And I think that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean that's something we really want to distill across our company. We're not hierarchy driven. We're idea driven. The best idea always wins, no matter who it comes from.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I love that. And this leads on so nicely to the next question. Talking about business decisions, and I mean they're so hard to make each time. Just share some insights into how you make these calls at Hansa. I mean, you explained it a little bit, but yeah, just maybe about the toughest decision you've had to make as well.
Sure, I can certainly talk about one of the more difficult decisions that we had to make, and it certainly is consistent with what you mentioned about Candel Therapeutics. We of course recognized that capital raise was difficult going back, into the beginning and the middle part of 2023, and recognized that there was a need for us to change our cash burn rate, like many other companies
Hmm.
in 2023 needed to do. And I think the approach that we took at Hansa, really relied upon the strength of our broader management team and the broader, set of colleagues within the company. As an executive committee, and in particular, I worked really closely with our chief medical officer. We identified what we knew were the top priorities for the company. And we distilled that down to just a few of them that were the most important priorities. And then we engaged the, the broader management team at the company to, based on those priorities, look at our spending, look at our project spend, look at our internal and external spend, look at where we were spending time and money with consultants, and try to make some significant reductions in that spend. During sort of a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year horizon.
Hmm.
And we tried to achieve our targets for improving the cash burn rate with those reductions first. And it was only after we sort of extracted the maximum value in that form of resource expenditure that we then engaged the same group to then look at people reductions, and we made the people reductions the last resort. We made it a separate step in sequence after other budget cuts, and we really worked with the team to ensure that whether it was budget reductions or people reductions, that it was going to be a sustainable path forward for the company. Now, we could have done the projects, the consultants, and the people reductions all at one time, and we could have done it top down. But I think that the time and effort that we put into engaging people in our broader management team, people deeper in the organization, it was well worth it. And I think it was also well worth it to take the time to
Yeah,
only go to people reductions after we'd exhausted all the other possibilities to get to our targets. And, I think some of that is a good reflection of the culture, the way that we operate. We wanted to prioritize innovation, prioritize the most important programs within the company, but we
yeah,
also wanted to prioritize the people. And I think it probably took us a little bit more time to do the approach that way than top down, but it was well worth it for everyone involved.
yeah. I mean, your mindset then just sounded exactly like Brian Chesky, who's the CEO of Airbnb. They obviously much on a much more dramatic scale. They had to go through a massive layoff during COVID for obvious reasons, and he basically said what you just said. In the way he let people go and helped them find new roles and supported them massively. Yeah, it's never an easy thing, but there is definitely a right way of doing it.
Yeah, that's right.
Um, yeah, talking about your recent financing round as well. So congratulations on that. How does it compare raising funds for a Swedish company compared to a US company, and what's different really?
Yeah, great question, Max. And I think it's well known that in Europe and Sweden in particular, there's some governance and regulations that exist. Particularly with a Sweden Nasdaq listed company like ours that are not in place typically in publicly traded U.S. companies. For example, we have uh, set parameters on the amount of capital raise that we can do on an annual basis, and this is set, during the annual meeting for the company.
Okay.
So that's a constraint that we've got to work within. And then the question becomes, well, how can we do that? We're thoughtful about our catalysts. We're thoughtful about the timing of when we would realize some catalysts, and we sort of map that back to the need to fundraise, and we're vigilant as well about market conditions. And if you combine that mentality with being very, very thoughtful about managing the relationships with our investment banks, and most importantly, managing the relationships with our larger current and future investors, then that puts us in a position to act quickly. And in our most recent, capital raise, which was about a 20% equity capital raise, we were able to do just that. We recognized that we had some positive traction in the business. We were making progress on some important clinical studies, and we saw that the market conditions looked favorable enough for us to act quickly. Do that round, and ultimately it ended up putting us in a good spot. We were, successfully raised the resources that take us from funded into 2025 to be now funded into 2026. And maybe the
Nice.
last thing I'll say about some of the differences between working within Swedish capital markets and the U.S. is that in this most recent round, it was really important for us to pick up some important U.S. investors, and we were successful in doing that. We think that's really critical, and of course, in the future, we have plans and aspire to achieve a dual listing.
Oh wow.
Listed in the U.S. as well as listed in Nasdaq in Sweden, right? So there's a long track record of Europe and Nordics-based companies that have sought dual listing in the U.S., and I think that gives you greater access to capital, access to a really large and strong investor base. So I think at some point in the future, that's also part of the plan for us.
Yeah. I suppose fairly new concept for you to be a part of as well, going from Teva and Pfizer, or am I wrong?
No, not at all, Max. In
Yeah.
fact, one of the great kind of luxuries of being in leadership roles within large pharma is that typically uh, capital raise or funding of the company's operations
Yeah.
are managed by the finance and treasury groups when needed. That's more a matter of capital structure, and oftentimes it's really operations that self fund a lot of what the company does. So yeah, even when you're in some relatively senior roles within big pharma, you often don't get directly involved in the capital raise. So this is another great opportunity from a development standpoint and a skill set standpoint to be involved in doing some of that work. And it also gives you a chance to interface with some really capable, really impressive bankers and investors that
Yeah.
frankly are phenomenal at what they do.
Yeah. 100%. And then finally, looking back at your career, it's undeniable that it's been successful. Um, what do you think has been the key to your success, and how much of it does come down to that mindset that we were talking about?
Yeah, and look, I think a lot of it is mindset, Max. I think that there's some fundamental principles like operating with integrity that are
Hmm.
really critical. I think that collaboration and creating an environment for cross-functional collaboration has been another big key to success. And again, for me, whether you want to call it tenacity or mental toughness, I'm just a big believer that again, you just keep playing the game, you keep fighting the good fight. You need to be strategic and thoughtful about what you do, but you have to keep rising to work through the challenges that emerge, and never quit. And I think for leaders, when you role model those things like integrity, collaboration, mental toughness, it leads to a culture, within your company. And you can do other things to support that culture in addition to just role modeling it. I think those end up being decisive factors. And, then ultimately, the last thing I would say, Max, is I've always been a big believer that it's really important to be thoughtful and strategic about the company's opportunities, whether that's in a given therapeutic area or
Hmm.
it's from a corporate strategy standpoint. And that very thoughtful, very strategic approach puts you in a position, I think, ultimately to be successful. But you can't be imprisoned by the strategy
Yeah.
and fail to recognize opportunism when it emerges, right? And to act quickly when it does. So that's probably the last thought that I could offer on, success, and whether that's personal success for me, or it's the more importantly the success of the business units or the companies that I've been a part of. That's certainly what I've observed.
Yeah. I suppose a question from me, like personally, does if you talk like stress levels and I mean, bound to get them in biotech pharma. Does that get easier throughout your career, or is even like stress a good thing? Does it push you on further?
Yeah, Max, I definitely think that uh, stress can be a source of energy, and you can use it in a constructive way, rather than a way that sort of depletes, your reserves.
Yeah,
I do think that over time, as you get more and more experienced, you've seen things that are similar, if not the same, and that often helps you, process and then quickly arrive at decisions for how to address things. I think that helps a lot, and I think that you can view stress and challenges in a negative way, or you can also at times see how it might lead to opportunities,
yeah,
although there are going to sometimes be silver linings. So I tend to be a pretty optimistic person, and I tend to be ready to play the long game, and work through challenges. And maybe that's some of why I think that biotech can be such an exciting place to work.
yeah. 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. And then my point about like does stress get easier? I think throughout my career, it definitely has. I think at the start of my career, I'd sleep next to my work phone on loud, and which my girlfriend loved, just in case I missed a call.
Yeah.
That was stress in my mind. I mean, actually, I lie. I still do that, um, but it definitely has got easier, and you get used to it. And yeah, I
I,
think so.
I,
And I
I
think
think too, the experience lets you prioritize and sequence things, right?
yeah,
Here's what we have to do now, and it's critical. Here's what we can do later, and this is why we can do that later. And then here are some things that are really nice to haves, but if we don't do them at all, we're going to survive, and
yeah,
everything's going to be okay. I think that that's really helpful. And look, I also just tend to have a little kind of uh, algorithm that always helps me. Study the facts and the data and the situation first, then develop a strategy based on those facts, data, environmental assessment. Um, Ensure that people have been a part of that, and if they haven't, that their input is reflected and that they're on board with things. And then
hmm,
finally, determine the process or the steps needed in order to execute all of that. And I find that sometimes just repeating that cycle where needed, can help you work through a tough situation.
100%. Yeah. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, Matt. Look, please like, subscribe, and follow the BioHub. And look, Matt, thank you so much for being on.
Really enjoyed the dialogue, Max. It's frankly, a little humbling, a bit of an honor to get included among some of the luminaries that you've already had on the program, and I've just really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit today, and look forward to any kind of future engagements.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Matt.
Thank you. Take care.